Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about some of the worst campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. I've given you my personal list of campaigns that I dislike, but I did emphasize that those are good Legendary Lords. I just really dislike those campaigns. This list is about the objective truth about some of the worst campaigns in the game. Now, I tend to limit one lord per race for these kind of lists because I don't want to fill lists like these with just one specific race. Though there would be one race that could easily fill this entire list, and that is, of course, the Vampire Coast. Also with a bit of Norska sprinkled in, just because, why not? So, the Vampire Coast, Silostra, Darafin. The problem in the Vampire Coast comes down to their lack of economy. They don't generate enough money from ports. They don't generate enough money from Pyrocoves. They have to choose whether or not they are going to have a Pyrocove or they're going to have a port, because you can't have both in a campaign. Their army roster, except their artillery, is, well, almost non-existent. There are some good units, of course, like a depth guard, but even then, you're talking about units that are very, very expensive for what they are doing. And when you consider the number of models on a unit like this, the stats that depth guard do have start ending up feeling lackluster. So that is the problem with the Vampire Coast, lots of issues. But why Silostra in particular? Why not Lufer? Why not Aranessa? Well, Aranessa is in a position, because of her sacking and looting income, in her starting position to kind of make it work better. Where with Silostra, you're stuck in the highway to hell between the High Elves and Dark Elves. See, most campaigns, they're hardest in the early period, and then they become gradually easier. That is not the case in Silostra. In fact, Silostra is one of those few campaigns which actually gets harder the more you play it, unless you take a side, and enjoy taking a side between Dark Elves and High Elves, both of which can hard counter you. That is the problem. Now, of course, you can argue that Luthor Harkon has the same problem. Yes, he does. But Luthor Harkon is not obligated to take a side between the Dark Elves and High Elves. He has a lot of capabilities to avoid that situation altogether in his campaign. You start next to Alifanar and Malekith, also Tarax, all of which are much better Legendary Lords than you are. You have a faction effect benefit of loyalty for new recruits, which is kind of pointless because loyalty is not really a big issue in this day and age of Warhammer 3. You do get an upkeep for Sirens and Morgul units, which is useful once you can unlock those units, to be sure. Lord effect-wise, Lord skill effect-wise, you get magical attacks for your army and physical resistance for your army. That would mean that Silostra's army is a melee army, which is not really great. The physical resistance can be useful against ranged attackers, but not quite. The way you survive ranged attackers is missile block chance and armor, in that order. Physical resistance is far less important, especially when you have so little of it. Then you do have some pretty nice magic, including the ability of summoning Knight Errant, which you can then upgrade. But speaking about that upgrade, you have the final skill choice over here of either getting Knights of the Realm summoned or questing Knights. But there is a level difference in a skill line that has a choice in it. It's not like you just upgrade one and then get the other. No, you choose one over here between Beyond the Realm and Sacrilege, and you don't get the other. That is annoying. Mind you, that is a special spell that Silostra has. In terms of her actual in terms of her actual skill line, she gets recruit rank, raised dead cost, which doesn't matter as much for the Vampire Coast as it matters for the Vampire Counts, because 1, it's only 10%, 2, the raised dead mechanic for the Vampire Coast is far less powerful than the Vampire Counts one. The problem it comes down to the reality that the Vampire Coast just doesn't have the same array of units to summon in the first place in Raised Dead, even if you do maximize it. And good luck maximizing it, because yes, you may get a situation like this where you can summon a bunch of units, but more often than not, you won't be able to summon a bunch of units. You do get 1 hero capacity for a Morgul Hunter. That is nice. You do get some Winds of Magic benefits, you get physical resistance for Bloated Corpse. Yay! And minus 90% upkeep for Bloated Corpse, a disposable army unit. That is great. Can we ignore that this event exists? Okay, it gives you also 10% physical resistance for Sirens and Morghols. Decent enough units, but just not really great enough. And then some miscast chance and Winds of Magic, Power Reserve Capacity plus 10 for your own army. It is not good enough. Now, some people will argue, oh, you can just abandon your position. Let me be very clear on this. If the only way you can play a campaign is to not play your campaign and just roam the seas and play the intern button simulator, then that's not playing a campaign. Now, you might say, well, Boris Ursus has a similar dynamic, or had one. Nowadays, it's much better to stay in a starting location. Yes, Boris Ursus had the situation where you could abandon your initial province and move elsewhere, but you were not constantly roaming around the map. You would settle down. It was just much better to go to Kislev, take Prague, set up your base there, and then go beat up Archeon. Nowadays, because of some changes that CA has made with respect to the terrain and with respect to the ruined settlements that are next to Boris Ursus across the sea, it's actually just better to go beat up Archeon very quickly and then beat up Arbol. Whereas with Aranessa, I wish you luck beating on Malekith. That's all I'm gonna say on that subject. Or Alifanar. Have fun dealing with Alifanar in a campaign if you do decide to pick that fight. Don't pick that fight. He will absolutely annihilate you in battle if he doesn't even ambush you, which, by the way, he absolutely freaking can. That's what I mean highway to hell type of situation. I'd much rather recommend you ally him. The research tree of the Vampire Coast is a mess, the unit roster is a mess, and Salostra is just not really that great. You can say about Luthor Harkon that he doesn't start with magic and has to spend time unlocking it, but here's the thing about Luthor Harkon. He does have factions that he can actually ally. He does have the capability of countering the Lizardmen. Fighting Lizardmen in melee, or fighting Lizardmen as Vampire Coast, is not the nightmare that it might be that fighting High Elves or Dark Elves is. Luthor Harkon does have to deal with the High Elves, but you can also avoid getting entangled with, say, Tyrion or Alariel, if you so desire. Whereas Silostra, regardless of how you play, you're going to have to take a side, and if you're counting on Alifanar and others doing the hard work for you, good luck with that, is all I'm going to say on that specific subject. You can argue that you can abandon your starting position, sure, but a lot of the factions that you start neighbors with are going to be much, much better than you are. That's kind of a unique situation for even the Vampire Coast. Again, Aranessa, you can argue about that, but Aranessa can go beat up Rapance. Let's just say Rapance is not stronger than Aranessa. And Aranessa can manipulate things between the ogres, the dwarves, and Ikiclaw. It's one thing to ally Ikiclaw with his nuclear weapons. It's another thing to ally Alifanar, who's all on his lonesome dealing with the might of the Dark Elves. I mean, I guess you could get lucky and Gormbrindle takes out Malekith, if you get lucky in this situation. And number 4, it would be Lord Mazdamundi of the Lizardmen. The Lizardmen just aren't a great faction to play right now, or a great race to play at the moment. But other Lizardmen Legendary Lord, or at least some of them, do have various faction abilities that can make the situation at least somewhat workable. It's still going to be miserable even in the best Lizardmen campaigns, like Oxyatl, or to some extent, if you want to consider it, Nikai or Tenuin. But Mazdamundi is as generic of a Legendary Lord as you can get of a Legendary Lord. He gets minus 50 construction cost for a single building that you don't even care about too much. He gets a minus 30% cost for rights, which have a ridiculously long cooldown. Yeah, that's really going to save me money in a campaign. His Lord skill line, what Lord skill line? He just gets a bunch of magical effects that aren't even that really freaking special. I mean, Ruination of Cities can be nice, Regeneration can be nice, but yeah, Mazdamundi as a Legendary Lord is just slightly better than a generic Lord. The only thing that he really has going for him is his mount, one spell, and a skill that gives you minus 50% upkeep for Temple Guard, a tier 4 unit. That's fun, really. Considering the pacing of campaigns in Warhammer 3 right now, By the time you even get that unit, you're either gonna sink or swim on many other levels in a campaign in Lustria, especially as Mazdamundi. I mean, Morathi won't bother you from the north, but Jan Bo will bother you, Marcus Wolfhard will bother you, other people will bother you. Hell, the Norskans that you start over here, they might actually be one of the biggest threats to deal with in the course of your campaign. That is really fun. I mean, the fact that they can recruit Marauder champions from turn 1 is just insane. I'm sorry, this landmark in Skeggy, dealing with it as Mazdamundi is a nightmare. I am not exaggerating this. Actually, it's not even that. You have one of Nakari's greater demons, or sorry, one of Slaaneish's greater demons to deal with. And just to give you an idea about this greater demon of Slaanesh, this greater demon of Slaanesh is capable of defeating your entire army if you're not careful about it. Despite all the issues Slaanesh has. Gee, I don't even want to imagine this campaign once Slaanesh gets reworked, because this minor faction of Slaanesh is going to become an even bigger nightmare than it already is. Don't get me wrong, it is a campaign you can win, but holy crap, do they stack the deck hard against you from the very beginning. But it's not just the fact that it's a hard start. It is a hard start. It's an incredibly hard start. It's also the fact that even as you play this campaign, you're playing for the worst aspects of a Lizardman campaign with none of the benefits any of the other campaigns that you have. Like, Gorak starts with Lord Croak, who's a much better caster 100 times over than Mazdamundi. And the lore, by the way, they're kind of like on a similar level of power. Because Croak is dead and Mazdamundi is, alive. That's just worth saying it. And it's just such a huge disappointment. Mazdamundi saved the world multiple times over, I should point out. He saved the world. He's one of the most powerful beings in the Warhammer fantasy universe. And he's relegated to generic Toad in the campaign. What a shame, really. What a shame. And number 3 is Wulfric, the Wanderer of Norska. Norska has many qualities. Having a good campaign is not one of them. Having an awful campaign with a bloated research tree that just doesn't really add anything is one of them. Having an income that's relying on sacking and looting settlements, but also having a situation in a campaign where you gotta raise a settlement for favor of the gods, and you have to do that in order to win your campaign. Having monster hunts that are bugged. I can go on. You understand the problems of Norska, but why Wulfric and not Trog? Certainly a Norskan campaign was going to be on this list. Honestly, both of them deserve to be on this list for various reasons. Well, here's the thing. Trog does start with control of almost an entire province, or an entire province in this particular campaign, if you want to. Or you can just sack these elements to gain more money and experience. I probably recommend doing that before going up against Malachi, just my perspective. But Trog also starts with the tier 2 settlement, so you can get the tier 2 barracks over here. And Gak, and has a replenishment hero. That is a pretty big deal, because Norskan units, a lot of them are very squishy, so having to wait until you get to tier 4 in order to unlock replenishment hero is as painful as it actually sounds. Look, replenishment is one of those things that matters in every single campaign, but it especially matters in campaigns where it takes a while to unlock, and the units you do have are typically the kind that will take a lot of damage. Yes, you can get yourself some nice units by cheesing this, by ambushing this army and cheesing and getting some Fimnir, some more Marauder champions. But again, you're going to suffer in this campaign because of that lack of replenishment. The fact that you only start with tier 1 settlement. The settlement you're starting with over here is not great. Be'lakor might come and pay you a visit. And you also have factions to the east to deal with. Norska is one of those really awful factions to play in a lot of ways. It's just really broken, and Wulfric just isn't that great. Yes, you get a minus 15% upkeep for Marauder units. But the thing about Norska is that early on in a campaign, you might benefit far more from being able to mass trolls. By the time you actually get to tier 3 and start getting Marauder champions, if you even can afford them, it's not like the upkeep benefit of Marauder units is going to help you mass Marauder champions that easily. Hint, it will not. Your economy can't support them either way. Also, Wulfric is a major disappointment as a character. He gets reinforcement range plus 30% for Lord's army and causes fear. That's great. Never mind that there's other units that can cause fear. You can cause terror. You do have various benefits over here for skill line, undeniably so, but there's just so many awful aspects about Wulfric, and he just doesn't feel like Wulfric should in the lore. Wulfric is a fairly great character in the lore that's always been horribly represented in Total War Warhammer. In fact, there are issues in Norscan campaigns that have been present since Warhammer 1, because Norsca is a Warhammer 1 race that has not been updated since that period. Just minor things, minor changes over here to Norsca. Even a nerf to their economy. Of all the things CA had to nerf when Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires came out, they nerfed Norsca's land-based economy. Think on that. Of all the races that they had to nerf, this was the one that they decided, yeah, Norsca is a priority for our nerfing process. I would like to know the explanation behind that, because it's nonsensical as far as I see it. But what do I know on the subject? Yeah, that's not really a great situation at all when you're talking about a race in general in Warhammer 3. So Norsca is a really bad race. Wulfric is not a great legendary lord. Like, Trog can at least work in some ways because he does have that troll benefit. Trolls used to be a joke of a unit, but nowadays trolls are really solid units. I mean, armored chaos trolls are better than any troll that Trog can get. That's a different discussion, don't get me wrong. Trog's campaign is not exactly stellar either. Both of them are terrible. Bugged monster hunts, problems with sacking, looting, and raising settlements. Just the whole suit of Norsca. But between the two of them, I would have to go with Wulfric being the worst campaign in the game. Just the slower start, worse start, more limited start. Worst problems to deal with in a campaign. Like, it says a lot about the campaign that starting near Malachi is a better campaign start than starting over here where you're quote-unquote relatively safe, quote-unquote. At number 2, it would have to be the Changeling. Genuinely one of the worst campaigns that Creative Assembly has ever made in a Total War game to date. See, other campaigns may have a limited start, may have issues with economy, may have issues with their lore design, but at least they have something. They offer some kind of gameplay that can be somewhat interesting. You at least have to fight for it. You don't have to fight for anything in a Changeling campaign. This campaign is over the moment you start it. But not in a good way. In no good way. Warriors of Chaos may be awful, but at least Warriors of Chaos can have a great unit variety that you can go for. It can have the fun aspect of vassalization. The Changeling has the schemes. And the problem with the schemes are not really that great. You want to troll the campaign map? There are many campaign systems that are much better than that. Greasus is a much better troll than the Changeling is in a campaign. And isn't that the sad state of affairs, really? Like, first off, making a troll campaign is already a very questionable decision by Creative Assembly, but the fact is that a lot of these schemes and grand schemes bug out, or at least individual schemes can bug out and not work. It is an issue that's been in SOC since day one, so that's one of the problems. Another thing is, you do get powerful effects, and it doesn't matter because you are never at risk in this campaign. Losing a Changeling campaign, you have to try really, really hard to lose a Changeling campaign. So that's another thing worth mentioning about it. And it's such a time-wasting campaign. It's like an intern button simulator campaign to 100. The army roster you have is strong, and you can even vary it as the Changeling quite a bit because you don't have the building tier restrictions that you may have in other campaigns. And you can get far more replenishment in Kairos, but it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter because you recruiting Warriors of Chaos and Chosen of Siege with maybe a couple of demons is still your best bet. It doesn't matter because no faction is going to be able to challenge you. Say what you will about Kairos, factions do at least fight them. So, for all the issues Kairos has in his campaign, he at least has to fight for it. The Changeling has an army that's pretty boring in a lot of ways because Tangors, Forsaken, which you may want to mass very early on in campaign, are not exactly really fun to play with. And even with the demonic units, it's just fluff. You don't need them. You can win this entire campaign with just Forsaken of Tzeentch or Tangors of Tzeentch, really, or a combination of both. And you'll never be challenged along anyway. The quest battles that you do get, the great schemes that you do have in this campaign can be interesting once. That's it. And if you're interested in just some quest battles, just play the quest battles. Seriously, that might be actually more fun and interesting than playing the campaign. If all a campaign has to offer are some quest battles, then that's not a good campaign. He does certainly have a good amount of individual battles. Those can be fun once. But the process of unlocking those battles in a campaign is so tedious, so awful, so slow. Like, you played this campaign for 60 turns in, at no point have you made any real interesting decisions, which is pretty unique in how awful it is in Warhammer 3. I mean, there are certainly campaigns where you can win very, very quickly, and you might not be challenged at all at any point. But again, even Warriors of Chaos do have some level of risk that's higher than this. Because Warriors of Chaos, if they lose an army, they feel it. If you lose an army as a Changeling, what do you care about? You'll just recruit another one very quickly. If that's really the case. Unless you're bankrupt, and even then it doesn't matter. And a faction eliminating your cults, very, very tall order. So, not a great legendary lore, not a great campaign. It's really the ultimate gimmick campaign that Creative Assembly has ever designed. I understand what they were trying to do. I'll also say flat out, it didn't work. Maybe they'll update it. Who knows? Maybe they can actually salvage this campaign. Good luck with that, CA. And finally, at number 1 is the Demon Prince, or Prince Yuri, or as Creative Assembly referred to him in the Immortal Empire's marketing, or just the marketing in general for his character, Daniel. That was not great, I gotta say. All the same, Daniel over here is horrible on a level that is unprecedented. The Changeling might have the worst campaign in Total War, or one of the worst campaigns. Daniel is like in another universe, and it's like amazing, like genuinely amazing. You're astounded when you think about it. This is the character, keep in mind, this is the character that we had an entire prologue campaign for, and then it's like, oh, you can name him however you want. It's like, what? That's how it should work. You don't spend hours building a narrative around the character and then just toss that in the toilet, CA. But they did. Don't ask me why they did it, I have no idea. His skill line is non-existent because he doesn't have a regular skill line. He gets items, and not even regular items. He can't wear an Armor of Destiny or Sword of Cain or anything like that. No. He gets items that he unlocks through a research tree, or not a research tree, a meter that he acquires with various glory options in a battle. And oh boy, glory. Imagine spending a campaign having to unlock unit and hero recruitment as opposed to, just constructing buildings and unlocking that. That's Daniel in a nutshell. Imagine a campaign where your lord can't even equip the super duper items that exist in the rest of the campaign. That's Daniel. Imagine a campaign where you're getting settlements dedicated to various gods, but the actual corruption that governs your control is undivided. That's Daniel. Imagine a campaign where your income is one of the worst in the entire game for the money you're paying. That's Daniel. Do I need to go on? Because I can. Imagine a campaign where you can own a lot of the DLCs for Chaos in the game and it's still awful, even though you have one of the largest pools of regiments renowned in the entire game. That's Daniel. Imagine a campaign where your lord defects are non-existent and you don't even have a special skill line. That's Daniel. I don't think I need to say anything more on this subject. I think I've explained it very clearly in just these couple of seconds why this campaign is awful. I can go on, but let's just put it like this. This is the most forgettable, worst campaigns that I've ever seen in a video game, period. This is the worst handling of a character from a narrative standpoint that I've ever seen in a video game, period. Why build a story around said character if you're just gonna flush him down the toilet anyway? An undivided demon of chaos is actually, or a demon prince, sorry, is actually a very rare thing in the Warhammer lore. There's not that many. And CA moved so far away from him that the other undivided demon of chaos, Be'lakor, is actually part of the Warriors of Chaos, when he should be a demon. And it's like, you want to play an undivided demon character? Play Be'lakor. Much better campaign, better mechanics, much more fun, much more interesting. Really, we sacrificed having Be'lakor in Realms of Chaos for this guy? What was CA thinking? I would really like to know. I think this should be a case study of how not to do game development, period. How do you do that? Like, cause keep in mind, the narrative, the voice acting, all the stuff that they built in the prologue, all the things they built up. Like, I've seen developers destroy their own characters, but I don't think I've ever seen a developer destroy their own character this quickly that they got special permission, as you might imagine, from Games Workshop to actually do it, because the undivided demon princes of chaos are freaking rare, especially in fantasy. I really, really don't know what the hell they were thinking with this one. Oh, it's a toy box campaign. Yeah, it's not a great toy box. It's not a great character. The unit roster is weak. Any other chaos faction in the game is better to play. Any other faction in the game, including the ones on this list, are better to play than this guy. Like, it's unimaginable to some level how badly they screwed this up. This campaign is so bad that I literally refuse to include it in most other videos and lists that I do, because it is on a whole another universal level of awful. NCA doesn't care anymore. You know what? I understand. I understand why they don't care, but I think we should never forget one of their biggest screw-ups in Warhammer 3, because it ain't SOC where they screw up in royal fashion. No. SOC was kind of like the dessert after the screw-up. Like, and it's not even on the same universal level of a campaign. Kostin signing out.